Welcome to Wadsworth History on Film, a program presented by the Wadsworth Area Historical Society and designed to record the oral history of Wadsworth for posterity. I'm Caesar Carino, your host, and our guest today is Bob Early. Bob, we're going to ask you a lot of questions today, a million questions as a matter of fact, but we have to start first with who you are. Bob Early was born when? Brothers, sisters, mother, father, all that kind of thing. Let's start with Bob Early.
Well, first of all, my name is Bob Early. I'm a fourth generation black living in the city of Wadsworth. My parents, William and Minnie Early.
Mm-hmm. Whom we all knew.
My mother was from the South. My father was born here. Mm-hmm. And I have two brothers, one brother younger than myself, William. My younger brother, Richard. My younger brother is 1 year younger than me. My older brother, William, is 4 years older than me, excuse me.
Mm-hmm. And what are their names?
William and Richard.
Mm-hmm. William and Richard. How old are they?
My older brother Kurt is 67.
60. How old are you?
I am 65.
60. Oh, wow, you got to be kidding. I remember when you were born.
My younger brother is 1 year younger than me.
No kidding.
63.
And where do they live?
My older brother lives in Rockville, Maryland.
Rockville, Maryland.
My younger brother lives in Toledo, Ohio.
Uh-huh.
My older brother is a software development manager. Mm-hmm. My younger brother is, he's the head of the Lucas County maintenance department.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Now, where were you born?
I was born in Wadsworth. Yes.
Now, you say that you're the fourth generation.
Yes.
And your father and mother, Bill Early and Minnie Early, were born here. Then that means that their parents were born here.
Also, yes.
And and your great-grandparents were born here.
Yes.
Were they the ones who were brought up then from Georgia?
That's correct.
Okay, can you tell us anything about that?
Let me see if I can get this correct. I think my grandfather he worked in coal mines.
That's why they brought them up
and
here.
He was brought up here in order to settle a strike at
coal mine right next to where I live.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Silver Creek coal mine, but it was a Klondike mine. Mm-hmm. And they brought them up from Georgia. Now, did they give them nice housing and so forth?
Now that I do not know.
I can tell you what they didn't.
Oh, well.
They'd put them out in the field and with tents.
Okay.
Right, as a matter of fact, it's not the closest place I can tell you would be at the end of First Street in that field, which was right next to the railroad. Mm-hmm. And the Barefoot Soul was there, and then Goldsmith and Eggleston are there now. But they put them in that field in tents. That's as far as they can go. So tell us what remembers you do have, or what things you did hear about your parents and grandparents and great-grandparents.
Well, the only thing I can say is probably the early stories of the church, at First Baptist Church, how it came to be, especially as a result of this strike in the coal yards. Some of them came here. And when they found out that there were going to be strike breakers, a certain percentage of the early blacks went back to Georgia or went back to Virginia in that area. But then a certain percentage of them stayed, and that was the origin of the First Baptist Church.
Which is 127 years old now.
127 years, yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
When I was mayor, I gave the proclamation for this 125th anniversary.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
So the First Baptist Church then kind of became the meeting place for all of the blacks, right?
Yes, it was. Yes.
And where was the First Baptist Church built at that time?
It was, the First Baptist Church was originally called the Rising Mount Zion Church.
Rising Mount Zion.
Yes.
And where was it?
At the corner of Mill and Kyle.
And that's still there?
And it's still there. The original building is there. It has been updated and some additions added, but the basic structure, which we have a picture of it, of course, the original structure is still there.
It's still there.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Now, it burned down 20 years ago or something like that?
There was a fire there, and it actually would be the north end of the church was heavily destroyed.
Right.
The vestibule and the auditorium suffered smoke damage, but most of the damage was at the north end of the church.
North end of the church where the altar is.
That's correct.
Right,
yes.
Now, would that then constitute the reason that Mill Street became the street where most of the blacks lived?
That's right, essentially, because that church in the early 1900s probably served as a meeting place.
The meeting place,
Yes,
right.
and
Can
then-
you tell us some of the original families of the church?
Well, there was the Earleys, of course,
You know,
the Heaths.
the Heaths, right? There were two Heath. There was my mother and father Heath and a little boy, Richard
That's
Heath.
right. And then there was
They lived down
the,
on Water Street.
Yes, that's right. Then there was the Howards.
The Howards,
Yes.
Blackie Howard,
That's right. And then there was Aurelius Howard.
Aurelius Howard, right?
He was one of the early founders of the church. Green,
The Greens, right?
and then
The Greens were, they would be, the girls would now be about 85 years old or so.
that's right. But both of them are gone.
I know they're
Yeah,
both gone, but they would be about 85. They also lived down in Chestnut or Water too, didn't they?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. They may have, but
When we were growing up, that's where they lived. And who were some of the other members of the family, of the church?
Pollards. The
Now,
Pollard.
Pollards is a name that escapes me.
There was a person, a woman when I was growing up. I was about 6 years. She was in her 80s, and she lived
Okay.
down the street from us. And her name was, I don't know what her first name was, but her last name was a Pollard. And she had, I think apparently some of her relatives had started the church, or were involved with the church.
That name
at
doesn't ring a
time.
bell with me at all.
Pollards.
Pollards, right. And who were some of the other ones? Mills?
Mills, of course, yes. Elvira, and there's other Millses there.
Right. Now, the Mills family goes back about 125 or 30 years too.
Yes.
Well, about 125, but 110 or 15 years, yeah. Now, the Danceys weren't involved, were they?
The Danceys did not particularly go to church, but I think they had some things dealing to do with the church at that time. But I have a sort of a history, an early history of
Right.
some of the early members of the church, and that name was not in there.
What about Rivers?
Rivers, of course,
Yeah.
yeah, Rivers, yes.
One was a minister,
Yes.
wasn't he?
Yes, he was. That's right.
And wasn't one of the Mills, the old elder Mills, let's see if that would be Gus and Estelle and Richard and so forth, their father or grandfather, wasn't he a minister? Or
Had to
did
be
he
their
preach?
father. I think
Pardon?
it was their father.
Their father.
Yeah, Richard Mills' father.
And
Richard,
he preached,
yes,
did he not?
Richard, who else? Helen Mills,
Yeah.
and
George, yeah. And Estelle,
Estelle, yes.
and another one.
There's Wilbur.
Wilbur,
Yes,
yeah.
Wilbur.
Mhm, yeah.
Yeah.
And their father.
Yes.
Now, at the one time, that Mills family did not live on Mill Street at that time.
No, they did not.
They
That's
lived down
right.
on Mechanic Street,
Yes.
didn't they? Yeah.
By the railroad tracks.
Right by the railroad
the,
track, yeah. I remember
was
that.
there,
And then the Rivers family moved down to back on the street, back on the road that went to the landfill.
That's correct, yes.
And
On,
at one time, they and the Jacksons, I believe, lived down at the Brickyard. Is that correct?
that's correct, yes.
And
They
some of the
moved.
people, as a matter of fact, Mr. Mills worked at the Brickyard at that time. Is that correct? Tell us some of your thoughts growing up, and we're going to be brutally honest here. You know, and I know that there has been a tremendous amount of, lack of good communication. That's as nicely as I can put it. But it's plain outright discrimination. With blacks, not nearly so bad here in Wadsworth maybe than some places, but I'm sure that you suffered some discrimination while you were growing up.
Oh, certainly.
And
certainly.
do you remember some of those things?
Well, at the store, there was a store, it's called Brenneman's,
Yeah.
which is now it's called Casaissimo's. And there they had a soda fountain there, and we were probably not welcomed or not encouraged to go in there. I remember, as far as ice cream, things like that. And then another couple of restaurants were probably, again, not encouraged to go there. If we had to, we could go in there and get something, but we couldn't eat it there. We had to eat it outside.
What were those restaurants?
That one was Stisher's.
Stisher's, which was down on the corner
Down
of, see, we have to give geographical locations because 50 years from now, people won't even know where that is.
Yes.
A corner of Garfield and
South Main.
South and Main Street,
Yeah,
right?
and Main Street. Yes.
Northwest
Yeah.
corner.
Yes.
No.
Stisher's restaurant.
And they wouldn't let you in, is that right?
We could go in there, but we would have to.
You couldn't eat it
We
there.
couldn't eat there. We had to take the food outside and eat it.
You'd have to eat it out there. Now, tell us some of the private feelings and private conversations that you and your friends would have as a result of this kind of discrimination. What were your feelings? It can't be good, but I mean, what were some of the
Well,
things?
we thought that it really wasn't fair, and it shouldn't have. It's not right, but at that particular climate, we really couldn't do anything because I suppose if we were to maybe have a sit down and something like that, that would probably lead to some other problems, and then we just endured it. We just endured it.
Now, you talked about something here a moment ago, a family. We had a man here in town who was a prolific inventor. Who was that? Taylor?
Taylor, yes.
Which one?
Don Taylor.
Don. Tell us about Don Taylor.
Well, he was an inventor in Wadsworth who had several inventions, guns and
For the rubber industry.
Rubber industry, yes. And he, in some cases, he was unable to be recognized as far as what he really did, as far as getting the recognition that some of his items. If he would have been white, probably he would have received more recognition, more backing, money is getting into maybe grow and things like that. But he didn't have that advantage.
Do you remember some of the inventions he had?
Well, he invented, I think he invented or had something to do with a rapid firing gun which was used in World War II.
World War II, it fired 100 rounds a second. And I watched it being tested at Aberdeen Proving Ground. 1952, we heard "Boop," and a tree fell down.
Yeah.
And I could not believe it. When I came to find out much later, years later, that it was Don Taylor who had invented that thing. Now, it did not work effectively because it heated up too fast and kind of melted away, but the invention still holds, and the technology of that invention has never been surpassed to the best of my knowledge. Yeah. A couple of years ago, when I was still mayor, I was privileged to write a letter of commendation for Don through his son, who wanted to get him one of the national awards. And I don't know if he ever got it or not, because then I left office. But this was one of the ones that was indicated. And I'm not positive what I wrote in it, but I do remember thinking to myself that I could attest personally to having seen the first test of that guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
What about, who were some of your friends when you were growing up? I mean, you had some white friends, but your black friends first and then some white friends.
Well, Richard Heath, of course, he
Yeah.
was the same age I was.
Mm-hmm. He was the same age as you?
Yes.
I still remember him as a wee little boy when his mom and dad used to clean the Ellen Hartzell.
Yes, that's right. Okay. And then there was Jerry Beard, his father.
Yeah, and he had a
worked
sister.
at the match.
He had a sister also.
Yes.
Joni.
Joni Beard, yes.
Yeah. And she married George Galbraith.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's correct.
Galbraith. We have to spell these names also because, you know, we say them and people will not spell them correctly. Joni Beard, B-E-A-R-D. And what did her father and mother do?
Okay. Mr. Beard worked at the match with my father, of course. And I don't know if Father janitor worked down there the same as he did.
But your father was not a janitor, though.
Well, okay. My early part, my father, the first years that my father worked at the match, he was a chauffeur.
Yes.
Yeah, he was a chauffeur.
For whom?
For the Ohio Match Company.
And he drove a Chevy all the
Yes,
time.
that's right. When he was in his 30s and 40s, that's right. He was a janitor. He was a
Chauffeur, right.
Chauffeur,
I remember him as the chauffeur.
That's right. Okay. And then later on, as far as when they were downsizing, I mentioned this before, when he was downsizing, instead of losing his job, he had to take a
Custodial job.
A custodial job, my mother.
And what did they do down there as custodians?
Well, clean the floors and things like that, just janitorial work. And my brothers and I used to joke about that because our education was based upon them working. And if they had to continue to work, we may not have been able to get graduate from college. No, he graduated from Bluffton College back in '59. I graduated from Bluffton College in '63. My younger brother graduated from Toledo University probably in the late '70s. But we all seem to joke about that our education was still based upon our parents holding jobs as janitors.
And boy, they made a lot of money too, didn't they?
Well, yes, they did. At that particular time, they sold candy and things like that. Because I remember going up to, and I don't know the name of the store.
B&B store.
Certainly, that's right, B&B store, and getting candy because my mother got candy, then she sold it down to the mat shop.
Do you know who sold the candy to your dad and your mom?
Well,
I did.
I don't.
I did.
Who is it?
I'm the one who sold it to them.
Oh, is that right?
Yes. I remember that as if it were yesterday.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I sold candy to them. They would come in, they would get Snickers, Mars
Yes.
bars,
Oh,
and
yes.
so forth, boxes of them.
That's right.
And there were 3 for a dime per retail, and I think they got them for maybe 2 cents a piece or
Yes,
something like
that's
that.
right.
Now they're horrendously expensive, but they were 3 for a dime. But I used to sell it to them.
Oh, boy.
When he would come in, they would come in on a Friday afternoon, but your dad always came, your mother never came to buy the candy. Well, she would come occasionally, but your dad would come in, and he was a small fellow, but very wiry, very wiry. And I would sell the candy to them. He would take 3, 4, 5 boxes, then he would come back again the next Friday and get some more.
That's right.
Yeah. I remember that as if it were yesterday, the B&B store.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What else do you remember about the conversations that you and your friends would have about the impropriety of discrimination?
Well, if I can think of some other things, we, well, like I said before, we just endured it, and we knew it wasn't fair, but we just felt that it happened, it's occurring, and we lived through it. We just became better persons.
Do you remember any really bad things? Or they're all bad. If it's discrimination, it's bad. But do you remember anything that really hurt you really hard?
Well, right down the street from where we lived, it was Fales Restaurant, down the end of Water Street and Main Street. Fales, Mr. Fale, F-A-H-L.
F-A-H-L. It was a little kind of a drugstore.
Yeah, and he wasn't shy about letting us know that we were, not welcome in that
Just
store.
what would he say?
Well, the
Was this
exact
Ike
words-
Fale?
Pardon me?
Was this Ike Fale?
Now that I don't know. I think it was Bob.
Bob Fale. Okay.
Robert Fale, Bob Fale. And he would just simply tell us that you people, words like that, you people, which is a degradation to me. I don't like that word. When somebody says you people, that's you people, well, you're not allowed in here, you can't come in here, things like that.
He came right out and told you that?
Yes, yes.
What would you do then?
Well, we'd probably just maybe go uptown and leave, yes. We had no choice.
Were you allowed in any stores or any restaurants? Or any?
Yes, but we were allowed, I mean, the thing is we were allowed in some of these restaurants, but we simply couldn't sit down and eat.
So you never ate in a restaurant until when?
If we ate in a restaurant, the restaurants up there, probably in the late 50s, 59, 58, 57, right around in that area.
You were able to eat in a restaurant?
Yes, yes.
Of course, it didn't seem to hurt you much because you've really gone forward with your life, and you're the first Afro-American president of the Kiwanis.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's extraordinary. And we're pleased to see that. Tell us a little bit more about what you remember that your grandfather. We probably can remember a lot of the things that your dad and mom did, and your father, because I knew them very well. But your grandfather was very, very old when I was very young. What do you remember about your grandparents?
Okay, my grandfather was at the old salt plant. I think he worked in the boilers. And the reason why I think, and I found this out, is simply because some of those boilers were so unsafe that they had a tendency to explode. So quite naturally, a black person would be put in that position other than a non-black. But at any rate, having said that, my grandfather, I remember going down there, working as a boiler operator. He and my grandmother lived on a house around East Walnut.
Mm-hmm.
The house is very small. They raised something like 7 kids in that very small house. I remember, we had some good times. My grandmother worked as a cook for the Kane family, who was
Bill Kane.
Yes.
They have the house up there on off Far Avenue at the very end.
That's right.
Now you say there was Walnut. Wasn't Chestnut?
No. It was Walnut.
Walnut. Okay.
Walnut. Yes.
Okay. Well, that's right, because the Larkins lived in Chestnut.
That's right.
Okay. I'm sorry.
That's
okay.
Right. That's right.
On Walnut. Now they had 7 children.
Yes.
Your dad was Bill.
My dad was Bill. Yes.
And he was the oldest.
He was not the oldest. He was the third. My oldest
Uncle.
My oldest aunt.
Right.
My oldest aunt was named Ruth. And then after her was Winifred. And then my father. My father was the oldest boy.
Boy, okay. I knew he was old as something. I thought it was the oldest child, but he's the oldest boy.
He was the oldest boy, yes.
What year was your dad born?
He was born in 1928.
28.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So
people would say, well, how come you really think about that? Well, my father had a license plate, WE28, on his cars, and he had that license plate ever since the early 50s. In other words, something like 40 years. Mm-hmm. He had that same license plate, WE28. So right now, my sister-in-law in Toledo has that license plate, but WE20, that's the time.
And your mother was who?
My mother was Minnie Early.
What was her maiden name, though?
Oh, Bird. She was a Bird.
Bird.
From Demopolis, Alabama.
Yeah, because we didn't have, she wasn't from here, I know.
No.
Now, your uncles, that would be your dad's brothers.
Yes.
Reginald.
Reginald was the youngest brother.
Right, and he probably was born in, 33, 4, something like that?
Yeah, because he is 77 right now.
77, so he was
Yes.
born 29 then?
Yeah.
29. Now, he was a tremendously good athlete in school.
Good basketball player, baseball player,
Yeah.
football.
Now, your dad was born in 28.
Yes.
And he finished school, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I think he graduated at 44, 45,
like that,
46,
yes,
something
yes.
like that. 46, I believe, yeah, 46. I'm almost positive 46. Now, tell us a little bit more about your going to school. Where did you go to school, and who were some of the people in that class, both black and white, and what was the climate at that time? You happened to go to school at a heck of a lot less devastating era than your parents did.
Now, are you talking about high school?
No, elementary school.
Elementary school.
Yeah, you went down to
I went to
Franklin.
the old Franklin School.
Old Franklin
Yes.
School. And who were some of the people in the classroom with you?
I remember as the principal at that time was Mr. Ray Holcomb.
Holcomb, right.
And then the teachers, boy, it's a long time ago, Mrs.
Wells.
Pardon me?
Wells.
Wells, yes. Then also there was a, her name is Alice Chester today.
Chester, right.
Yes.
Alice Williams.
Alice Williams, yes. I see her once in a while, every month. She has got to be close to 90, something
Probably.
like that.
She still looks like
She's like
50 and
just out of
runs,
high school.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
She still plays the piano.
Oh, yeah.
Because we go up to the Kiwanis
In Medina.
in Medina, where she attends. She plays the piano. She's been playing the piano for at least 50 years, and
Yeah, easily.
I see no chance that she's going to quit either. She'll be playing for the next 50 years.
Oh yeah, she's in good shape. Wonderful. I see her frequently at funerals. She goes to everybody's funeral because she knows everybody, obviously.
Yeah.
Now, who were your classmates?
Well, there was, let me see, that particular time again was Richard Heath.
Okay, Richard.
Then there
Richard was chubby little fellow at one
yes.
time.
There was David Hanna, his brother was
mayor.
the mayor.
They lived on right around the corner from the school.
Then there was John Klein,
Okay.
who was I think he was a janitor. His father was a janitor at the grade school, John. Let me see. There's Frank Schowacker, Linda. Well, I even forgot her name.
How many black kids were in the school or in the classroom?
In the classroom, when I was going in, there was just three. There was just three, including myself.
You.
Richard Heath. Well, actually four. I'm sorry. Richard Heath.
You.
No, I shouldn't say that because Richard Heath was in Central because where he lived, his parents lived down from the church, so
That's
he
right.
went to the Central High School.
Right.
So in actuality, there's actually three then.
That's
Jerry
why
Beard.
I was wondering how he got down to, because I knew they lived right there, right across from Kyle Street.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's where he lived.
Okay.
So he went to the Central School. But then as far as Franklin, then there was Jerry Beard, Richard Early, my brother, and then myself. And of course, my older brother had been at that particular time, he was in high school.
So you were, the two of you were in the same classroom?
My younger brother was a year behind me.
Okay.
Of course, we might have shared some of the classrooms when the teachers taught both grades.
Now, did you have any problems then with the other kids?
Not really, because at that particular time, when you went to Franklin School, you shared one thing. You shared that you were poor.
Poor.
And I think that probably was the leading edge because we didn't have time to, deal with racial things. We was just, everybody was poor. Everybody's parents or parent worked at the
Poor.
match.
Well, absolutely,
Yeah,
surely.
yeah. And probably the only thing about that is, I remember when you talk about the match, the only good thing about the match is we remember about the picnic. The match company used to have the picnic, the annual match picnic at Chippewa Lake, where they took over the entire lake area, and we went there. We had tickets. We had the rides were free, next to nothing. It was just an enjoyable Saturday afternoon.
At one time, probably just before you were a young fellow, there were 1,700 people who worked at the match.
1,700.
1,700, and most of them were right around the corner from down the street from there, and they walked home for lunch and so forth and so on. Okay, now we went to high school. You get to high school. What was the climate there for Afro Americans?
Well, I can remember. It wasn't. It was. We didn't suffer some of the some of the innuendos and items like that probably might have happened at a bigger school. I mean, I think we were more closely aligned with it as far as my friends and things like that. Sure, we had the so-called not getting along with some of your students, but I don't think it was a racial thing.
No, not a racial thing.
Yeah.
Wadsworth had a fairly decent reputation for inclusiveness.
Yes.
And as I remember, we made a strong effort not to be. I mean, most people in Wadsworth made a very strong effort not to be discriminatory, but there still was discrimination. We mentioned the Rivers children. Linton Rivers was the first black child ever to go to centralized school. And our teacher spent 2 weeks with us preparing us for the advent of Linton Rivers into the classroom. And Linton was in my classroom. And he then moved away, and he didn't stay with us all that long, but 5 or 6 years, I think, as I remember. And Jim Rivers came, and then his sisters came. But I can still remember the teachers telling us and showing us, and to this day I can still feel the strong urging on the part of this teacher. This teacher happened to be Miss Kuhn and Mrs. Vining. They were extremely careful to make sure that we would not say anything bad. We had to play with them, and we had to hold hands with them and so forth. And I think that pretty well identified what the city tried to do. In high school, some of the very, very best friends were blacks and whites.
Oh, certainly. Mm-hmm.
I can still remember Lee Kahn, a person who graduated in '44 with Chuck Dancy.
Oh,
and
yes.
Chuck Dancy and Lee Kahn and Chuck were the best of friends. Lee was Jewish, he was black. I can still remember the Joni Beard, who was in our class, and she was the most popular girl in the entire class. Of course, she's gone now, she's dead now. But she was the most popular girl in our class. But when it came time for prom, I can still remember also the fact that she wanted to bring a boy from Akron to the prom, and it was a closed prom, and we had a class meeting to give her special permission because, and as Joni put it up there, she stood up and said, you know, you people are the most wonderful people in the world, but you know that not a white boy here will ever take me out to the prom, and I want to go to the prom. So I can I can come to the prom if you let me bring someone from the outside. And it was unanimous, every single person. Harriet Cable was the one who actually conducted the meeting. And after it was all over with, I can still remember tears coming into her eyes and say, you know, senior class, I'm so proud of you. Not one of you decided not to permit that. Mm-hmm. So, you know, there are some things like that. Yeah. But years before that, it wasn't exactly that way. Do you remember a person by the name of Mr. Watkins, the first garbage man in Wadsworth?
Like I said before, faintly.
Faintly.
Yes.
I remember him very well.
Yes.
Just the kindest man. And he had a truck, and he would go around picking up garbage, and it was an open truck, and of course it smelled bad. And he was called Mr. Watkins, the garbage man. But I would talk with him. I was working at the B&B. He would come in, he would talk. We had the nicest conversations. He was not from the First Baptist Church. He had a different church altogether. Mm-hmm. I think he might have been Jehovah's Witness or something like that. I'm not positive. Was he?
I'm not sure, but that sounds correct.
He was not,
yes.
well,
yes.
First Baptist.
From First Baptist, though.
And we would have the nicest talks, and he would try to convert me. And even at that young age, I was not convertible. I'm Roman Catholic, and wasn't about to change that, but I still had the nice conversation with him. Let's go back to your college days. You went to Bluffton College.
Yes,
your brother went to Bluffton College.
Yes.
And what other black person from Wadsworth went to Bluffton College?
There wasn't any.
Yep. One more.
Pardon me?
Jim Rivers.
Oh, I forgot. That's right.
Jim Rivers went to Bluffton College.
He would shoot me if I said that. But
yeah.
yes, Jim was he was in the class behind me.
Yeah,
yes.
Jim Rivers went to Bluffton College
yes.
as well. Tell us about Bluffton College. Bluffton College is a Mennonite college.
Yes.
And they had never had this kind of integrative student body before. Is that correct?
Well, yes. As far as I know, they had about 2 or 3 blacks previous to to my coming or my brother was coming. Because I remember there was a black football player. In other words, they had a black football player. His name was Willis Taylor, and then Elbert DeBinion.
Elbert,
E-L-B-E-R-T, Elbert DeBinion.
Spell the last name.
D-U-B-E-N-U-N. I think that's it.
DeBinion.
DeBinion,
And he was black.
Yeah, he was black, that's right.
And that was before Jim Rivers came?
That's right, that's right.
And then Jim Rivers.
Well then, when Elbert DeBinion was a senior, my brother was a junior. Mm-hmm. And then, as far as Willis Taylor played football. I think when Willis Taylor was a senior, DeBinion was a freshman. So I'm just trying to get that as far as a time element. But those are about the only blacks that I know of that went to Bluffton.
What did you major in?
I majored in chemistry.
And what did you do with your life then?
Well, I came back and looked for a job, and I finally found employment at the Morton Salt Company in Rittman, Ohio.
And why did you have difficulty finding employment?
Well, yes, I did.
Why?
You're sitting out because probably
Black.
black, yes.
And what kinds of problems did you have? Did they just say, well, we don't
Well,
have a job
we'll just
available?
have a job, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll get back with you, things like
And that's
that.
that. And you were used to that, right?
At that particular time, that was probably a familiar statement.
And then, what did you do at the Morton Salt Company with chemistry?
Well, I worked in their laboratory and became the plant chemist there.
You're the plant chemist?
Yes.
And when did you become plant chemist?
Probably, let me see, I was there for 40 years. The last 10 years, the last 10 years, we had a quality manager, and that was the next step above me.
And then
so,
beyond that was the top man.
Yes.
So you were third in line then?
Yes, about that.
Now, a tremendous climb from the fact that the only thing that your parents could do was be either chauffeur or custodian.
Yes, it was quite an achievement, I suppose.
Yeah. And your brother did what? What did he major in?
My oldest brother, William, was a math major, physics minor. And he worked a number of jobs in the computers, math, things like that.
Now, he's retired too?
No, he still works.
He still works.
He's trying to retire, but he still works.
But you're retired?
Yes, I am.
And what about your other brother who went to Toledo?
My younger brother is still working. He's the head of maintenance for the Lucas County, Lucas County Housing Authority.
Right, but he's not a custodian.
No, he's not.
No, he's a head of maintenance, which is an administrative job.
Yes.
And probably an executive position.
Yeah.
Now, going back to the coal mines, do you have any recollection from either your parents or your grandparents? Did you know your grandparents?
Faintly.
Faintly. So you probably wouldn't have, but
No.
do you remember your mother and father talking about the fact that they went down there and brought them up here? Actually, there are some people who say that they probably didn't come willingly, but I don't know if that's true or not. Do you have any idea of whether they were just brought up here? And
The only thing I can say about that is is the fact that they were brought up from Virginia, that area, as far as to break the strikes at some of the coal mines.
we brought them from West Virginia, and Alabama.
Alabama, yes.
And who were some of the ones from Alabama? Do you know who those people were?
No, I don't. I do not. No.
We are so regretful that someone did not write this history as it was going on. But the unfortunate thing is that the population was probably so anti-black that they didn't think that they were worthy of recognition. But obviously we know differently now. We wish we would have done that. Let's come to the present now. Do you have children?
I married late in life, and my wife has children.
Okay.
Actually, they're my
And whom did you
stepchildren.
marry?
I married a Sally Florence from Worcester.
From Worcester.
Yes.
And her children are who? Let's make sure you get them all, because if you don't, you're in trouble, Bob. Name them all.
There's a Lindsay Florence. He lives in Cleveland. A teacher, principal.
Is it principal? Where?
Yes, up at in Shaker Heights.
Okay.
Then there's a Paulette Perkins. That's her married name. She lives in Cleveland. And then there is a Gail Florence who lives in Akron. And then there is a Corey Florence who lives in Worcester.
Okay. Now, what does your wife do?
Well, she's retired like I am.
And what did she do before?
Well, sales clerk. She
Where?
worked as sales clerk for Sally's in Worcester, and also she worked at Walmart.
At Walmart.
Not Walmart.
How'd you meet her?
Well, always in the church. Actually, her uncle is our minister.
Oh, Reverend Thompson?
Yes, that's right.
And they're from Worcester as well.
That's correct, yes.
And you're heavily involved with the church, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now we want to get into the church and a little bit of its history. You, I think that you were the one who did the history for the church, did you not, on the 125th?
I did that, but it's essentially we had a lady, Mrs. Neely. You remember?
Oh, very well,
Yes.
surely.
She had essentially done some early history of the church from another book. I'll have to make sure you get a copy or something
Okay.
like that, as far as writing some of the early personalities of the church.
Right.
And
I would
then-
like to have that,
And then
really.
I just simply took that and wrote a sort of a biography of what had happened that I know of, the early members and some of the things that happened in the church, and things that was done to the church, and maybe the early ministers, pastors, and things like that.
What do you remember about what are some of the outstanding things that you remember about the First Baptist Church?
Well, we had a Reverend Lindsay.
Yes, I remember him very well.
He,
He was there when the fire was.
No, he wasn't there. No, I'm talking. Reverend Lindsay he was the pastor of the church when I was a senior in high school.
Yeah, I thought that he was there when the fire was.
No. The minister of that church was Reverend Leonard.
Oh, Leonard, that's right.
Leonard.
Yeah, but I remember Reverend Lindsay.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And I remember he was such a.
Wasn't there a June Lindsay also?
Okay. Let me see. They were not related, but of course
They were
there
not related?
Yeah, there was a Lindsay that went. There was that Lindsay family that
Right.
worked in the match too. That's right, June Lindsay.
Yeah, but they were not related?
No, they were not related.
Okay.
No.
And Reverend Lindsay was from where?
He was from Akron.
From Akron as
He was
well.
from Akron. He came out to, and he pastored our church in Wadsworth, and he was there. Just trying to think, because as long as I remember, when I was born, when I was born, I think he was the minister at that particular time, because I think I was born in, say, 41. He baptized me in a church in Akron. We didn't have a baptismal pool in the Wadsworth First Baptist, so he and I think my brothers, and we were baptized by him in Akron, and I was about 6 or 7 years old, something like that.
And you remember anything else about the Wadsworth First Baptist Church that could be?
Well, it was the origin of the Northern Ohio Baptist District Association,
Okay.
which is a confederation of all of some Baptist churches in this area, and it essentially started at the First Baptist Church in Wadsworth, probably back in the early 50s or something like that.
In 2000, the year 2000, they had a convention in Akron, and as a result of the Northern Ohio or Northeastern?
Yeah, Northern Ohio.
Northern
District.
Ohio
Yeah,
District.
Northern Ohio Baptist District Association.
Right.
Yes.
As a result of that, starting here in Wadsworth,
Yes.
they invited me to be a speaker,
That's right.
and I was there. And I looked around that room, and there were so many people there from the Akron area who had been my former students, and I recognized them.
is that right?
And one of them was one of the board members from the University of Akron. That was, oh mercy, Janet Purnell.
Okay.
Janet Purnell.
That's right.
And she was sitting right there.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I was pleased to see her, but I was shocked also because I didn't realize that she was part. But then she told me all about the relationship between the Wadsworth Church, and so Wadsworth has a very rich heritage here of black Christian people here in town. Who are some of the families now who are still members of the church, the black families? There are very few Wadsworth
Very few,
families.
yes. We have Helen Mills.
Helen Mills from Akron comes to
Akron,
Akron.
yes.
What's her married name? I always call her Helen Mills. I still call her.
Well, it's actually Helen. It's Trice. Helen Trice.
Trice, that's right, yes.
Trice, yes. Helen Trice, yes.
And one of your longstanding members just died, and that was Lillian Purdue.
Yes, this is Purdue.
And who else?
Well, her son, James Purdue, he passed about, must have been about 3 or 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then Lillian, of course. Then we have a person, Mrs. Janet Green Riggins.
Janet Green.
Her
Riggins.
father was a was a member of the church, was a deacon in the church.
Right.
Of course, she doesn't go to our church, though she goes to Akron, but she comes over and visits us occasionally. Janet Green Rickens, yes.
Anybody else?
Well, that's about it as far as the original members. We have, most of our membership is from Worcester now with our pastor, but as far as the original members of the church, it'll be probably, it's
We have one
Helen
member,
Trice and myself.
one member who was a policeman at the University of Akron.
I can't think of her name. What's her name? She's from Wadsworth. She never attended our church. She was married to Don Taylor. Don Taylor's son. But
Lenore.
Lenore, yes, that's
Yeah,
right.
Lenore Taylor.
Lenore
But I thought that I saw her on 2 or 3 occasions when I gave proclamations at the church.
No, I don't think you
Oh,
did.
really?
No,
I thought I did.
no.
Now, give us the genesis of Baptist worship. In other words, you go to church in the morning, and tell us how it goes, because it's somewhat different from most Protestant churches. But tell us a typical service.
Well, a typical service would be that, well, we have what we call a devotional period, where we just simply praise God. We sing songs and have a prayer, read the scripture, and the participants are encouraged to do anything they can to lift the Word of God up, whether
Okay.
it's by prayer, by song, saying something, just telling you how you feel about Lord and Savior and things like that. And
Okay.
that's our devotional
Tell
period.
us about the call and response.
Well, we have the minister, more or less, it's his way of calling the church to order.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a responsive reading, which he reads a certain verse, and then the church membership has a verse to say, probably in response to that. And then the third is a response where the minister and the church congregation reads a letter or reads a statement together. And it's all about confirming our faith to the Word of God.
Right. Tell us about the practice of the congregation being an integral part of the sermon by responding voluntarily and individually to.
Well, the Baptist church is probably more of an emotional type of
Right.
service than the Lutherans or the Methodists, something like that. It's more emotional because in some cases where membership are, if not encouraged, if it's emotion, if they feel like responding, they do. And it's just a...
And what are some of the responses? that they
Well,
offer?
it's like amen and praise the Lord. I mean, if the minister is talking and he says something in particular that you can really believe, and it's more the thing. Because I've said that myself. I said, amen. That's right. Things like that. It's just more of an emotional response to what the minister is saying. I suppose if I went to the Methodist church and maybe the minister in his talk happened to say something that I would probably agree with, and I suppose if I would say amen, then maybe the membership would probably look at me and say, "What in the world are you doing?" But that's
it's
just
commonplace in the
commonplaces,
black,
yes.
the First Baptist Church here in Wadsworth and elsewhere as well.
It's more emotional.
What about the music?
The music is again more emotional, where we have we have the pianist and maybe other musicians are again more emotional in their talk and in their music because it's encouraged, but that's just the way the way it is.
Now let's go to some of the things that are kind of touchy. Where do you live?
I live on Stratford Avenue in Wadsworth.
Did you have any problems getting a house on Stratford Avenue?
Did I? Not really. I did not. I know Jim Rivers did.
Yes, he did.
Yeah. He did it. He bought his house, was it before me or after me? I shouldn't say that because I lived in an apartment for a number of years. And Jim had a house before I did. That's right, that's right. And he had problems with getting a house. I did not.
He had
did.
difficulties getting a house when he first came to Wadsworth.
Yes.
Came back to Wadsworth.
Came back to Wadsworth, yes.
He had been away for a while, but he was born here in Wadsworth, as many of them were. What about the neighbors? Any problems with that?
Neighbors, no. And another fact that probably escapes us, but when I was growing up, you know, all blacks had white neighbors. I maybe you didn't realize that, but it was a fact of life.
There were only 11 families in Wadsworth.
That's right, but each one there was no so-called quote unquote, there was no black area.
No.
Like
Mill Street would be the closest thing to it.
That's the closest thing, yes.
But there were more whites on Mill Street than there were blacks.
Yeah.
For instance, the Hallowells lived right next door to the Dancys, I believe, and they were white. And as you went down through the other thing is too, that there are people who will say that they would be afraid to walk in the black sections of Akron. Of course, you know, you can also say that I'd be afraid to walk in some of the white sections of Akron too. But our people would go at night without any escorts at all from the school down to the football field at Garfield and go down Mill Street and think nothing of it.
That's right.
Yeah. The only complaint they would have is that they had to go one way or the other. They had to climb a hill.
Well, probably the sidewalks were probably.
But that hill was
good
pretty
shape.
steep
Yeah,
on both sides of it. If whether you're coming or going, it was steep. But there was not that kind of problem. Before we bring this to a close, which will be in just a few minutes from now, I'd like to have you give us a little bit of your own personal, shall we say, history of some of the ways that you met with a discrimination and how you overcame it, or how you manipulated or whatever you had to do to get through. You did not become chief chemist at Morton Salt because of your looks, even though you're a very handsome man and so forth, nor because of your wealth, because, you know, that probably isn't exactly there either, or your influence. How did you get to become the chief chemist, and what did you have to do that?
Well, it was just a matter of showing that you did the job, you were able to contribute to making our laboratory more responsive to the company, to what they wanted us to do. That's all. As far as some of the product that they made, we made essentially salt products, salt production.
What are salt products?
Pellets.
Oh, I see.
Pellets,
Okay.
yes. And one of my jobs was probably making graphs and charts to demonstrate how the quality of them were with respect to screening analysis and dissolving rates. Unfortunately, you know, if you have a water softener, a water softener is designed to use pellets of a certain size, and you can't put salt in there because you will, you know, mess it up as far as making of a brine solution. That's what it is, and it's just a matter of demonstrating that our quality is very good, and if we see an aberration, something that drops, we have to be responsible to that and making sure it comes back to where it was before.
What motivated you to become a chemist? Something happened in high school?
Oh, not really. I just thought it was a good thing to get into. I happen to like a little bit science, and in high school, and so.
Who were your teachers in high school in science?
There was a Mr. Holmes.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
A Richard Holmes.
Yes, he was also became the principal.
That's right.
He's dead now.
Yes, he's unfortunately.
He went from Wadsworth to Smithville.
And then
became superintendent down there.
The chemistry teacher at that particular time, his name escapes me. He taught me chemistry when I was a senior in high school.
Houston, maybe. Mr. Houston.
No. Oh, I can't think of his name. Because the reason I know him, because when I think I said I had an apartment down West Street, near West Street. And he was the,
Owner?
not the owner, but he took care of it. I
Oh.
mean, he had retired from teaching, and then he took that as a job. And
First name was John?
John, I don't know. That's been such a long time ago. But anyway, he was our teacher, and he did an excellent job of bringing chemistry, making it alive and making it work.
And that's what motivates you?
Yes.
Now, going back to the Morton Salt, has nothing to do with the history of Wadsworth with reference to blacks, but
Yeah.
after salt comes out of the earth. Do you have to do something to refine it, or what?
Well, in the operation in Rittman, we essentially pump water down. We have salt veins. We have veins that go clear from,
Lake Erie?
well, actually West Virginia.
Oh, West Virginia, really?
West Virginia, up in this area, under Lake Erie, through Pennsylvania, up through New York State, and it's literally one huge vein.
So you're not going to run out of salt
No.
tomorrow?
And we pump water down one pipe, dissolve that salt there, and then bring it up in another pipe. And we're working out of a small cavity that's as far as the length of, 3 or 4 miles. But this whole vein that we're working out of, like I said before, it goes from West Virginia clear up to New York, so there's no danger of us running out of salt.
Not for a while.
Not for a while.
So and you've used up only 3 or 4 miles of this?
Yes.
And we're probably talking about 700 or 800 miles,
Certainly.
500-600 miles,
Minimum
something like
of
that.
that.
And you've been pumping salt down there for what, 60, 70 years, haven't you?
At least that.
Yeah, so
I've been there for 40 years, and they were doing that in the early 40s.
Oh, yes, right. Now, what about the people that you had working for you? If you were the chief chemist, you had more than one chemist, obviously. Were they black or were they white as well?
Well, they were white. I was the only black there.
You're the only black there?
Yes.
Did they have any blacks in administration at all at Morton?
Unfortunately, they did not.
And they did not?
No.
You were the only one?
Yes.
Did you have any difficulty becoming the, third in command, I guess it would be?
Well, it was just a matter of demonstrating you do the job, that's all.
And they didn't care whether you were black, white, pink, chartreuse, or
No.
green, or Duvernay, or anything else. They just wanted a good person, right? And they got one. That's wonderful. What about, you had a difficult time going into stores and so forth. What about clothing stores? Would they permit you to go into a clothing store and try on clothes?
As far as I can recollect, we did not have a problem with that. And I'm just trying to think how many clothing stores was in Wadsworth.
Well, there's only one at the top, for men. It was Curtis Menswear, and
that's
then
right.
at the south end we had Basco's Hardware.
That's right.
Had clothes.
Pete Basco's.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
Pete, yeah.
That's right.
We have come to the end of our hour. Believe it or not, it's been going so fast, but we are appreciative of this, and we're trying to get every aspect of Wadsworth history on film. And you helped us today to get a very, very important segment of history, and probably the oldest family in Wadsworth, the oldest black family in Wadsworth. You go back 4 generations, at least 4 generations, so that's probably at least 110, 15, 20 years or so. Bob, thank you again.
And thank
we
you.
are so grateful not only for your being here, but also for you having been recognized by the community in so many wonderful ways, finally, as the president of Kiwanis. I'll put a plug in for Kiwanis for
This
you.
will be my 3rd year.
Third year, wonderful.
Yes.
Thanks again, Bob.
Thank you.